she's a doctor.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dovek, and she's a dietitian.
Hey, I'm Hannah Schuyler, and together we are the
DoctorXDietitian Collab. All right, DoctorXDietitian fans, today we are tackling a very serious topic, and it is on the transfer of addictions. That is something that can happen after bariatric surgery. What is it? Why does it happen? And what you can do to get help so that every day might be a struggle for all of us, but how can we help you to move forward and overcome that? And how can you even recognize if you have an issue?
Right, or recognize it early on to help kind of halt it if possible.
Exactly. So we're going to just dive right into this topic and specifically about bariatric surgery. So studies have shown that up to 30%, 1 in 3 patients who undergo weight loss surgery end up having some kind of a transfer of an addiction. So the whole theory here is that the thought is that if you struggle with your weight, you probably had some kind of an addiction to food, some sort of disordered eating. Perhaps it was binge eating. Maybe you were somebody that, again, at night sat down and you just, I just ate the whole thing of ice cream. And that was just part of your routine or some habit. And it was almost you were dependent on this for food. And food is always a tricky one because food is necessary. Food is fuel. Food you need, of course, to be able to survive. Right. And sometimes as soon as it hits those receptors or you eat certain things, it just like triggers all of those feel-good hormones and thoughts and, things in your chemical reactions in your brain.
Right. It's dopamine. And it does make you feel good. And we have comfort foods for a reason, And,
we do.
And like you said, food is a tricky one because it's not something you can quit. Cigarettes you can quit. Alcohol you can quit. This is why eating disordered or disordered eating recovery is so challenging.
It's very, 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 very hard. And, how does a typical addiction start? So first, it's the hard thing of why, never smoke the first cigarette, just never do it. Or because you think if I start, I have this pain. And then it's all right, I took a pain pill and then I took another one. You have to get initiated onto it at some point. So there's always that first time.
Yeah.
And some of these things make you obviously feel like, that was pretty good. And I have control. I'm not really quite dependent on it yet. And then you kind of get into this more frequent use where you start to experiment with it. You try it at night or in the day or food is something that you have to eat 3 meals a day and all of the things in there. But next thing you know, you're regularly doing this habit, this addiction. And then ultimately, there's risky usage, which is where okay, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but this is getting scary. Then dependence. And that's where you really don't have control. And then that is where this is a disease. I mean, A lot of these things we're going to talk about. And then you go from dependence into a straight on addiction to it. And then ultimately the only thing at that point you'll need is you're in full crisis and you need treatment to be able to pull out of this kind of this vicious cycle that can be addiction. And it can be so challenging here. And we're going to talk about the different types of addictions that exist. So first off, obviously, there's the food addiction, and you being our dietitian here and all of that stuff. Can you tell us a little bit more about binge eating or about disordered eating or even about certain foods that are more vulnerable or susceptible to becoming in that addictive kind of a food category?
Yeah. I mean, again, disordered eating is a whole branch of dietetics, and there are people that specialize it and that really focus on that, and it has a lot of crossover with therapy and that side of things. Binge eating would be eating an excessive amount at one time, really, and some people binge and purge, but some people will just binge, and people might hide it. They might do it late at night, and a lot of times it does tend to be on things like cakes or cookies or chips or sodas or, kind of go alongside of that. Just really those highly palatable foods that do trigger that kind of dopamine response. And it's to the point where you can't really stop yourself. And then, of course, there's other eating disorders like bulimia, which is where you do actually then purge, or anorexia, which is anorexia nervosa, which generally we see in people who are underweight, but you can have people with obesity that also have anorexia nervosa, which means that there's food avoidance. And this isn't really related. It could be, though, I would say, to this topic is orthorexia. Do you know about orthorexia?
No.
So it's a newer one, and I don't know that it's actually on the DSM yet, but it's an obsession with clean eating or healthy eating, but to a point that it disrupts your life. So, like, you won't eat something if you don't know where it's from. If you don't know that it's organic, if you don't know that it has this specific breakdown, nutrient breakdown. And so it's caused a lot of problems. I would say it's in a lot of like the fitness things, influencers and stuff like this, that whole idea of like clean eating, which is not a real thing. And it can be really dangerous, which I could see in theory somebody with bariatric surgery having, starting to be like so focused on their macros and being so perfect that you could run into something like an orthorexia.
So do you feel like after surgery, some of our patients could get this?
I could see it happening in the fact that, yes, they are focused on that like specific nutrient breakdown. And you do start to see I've had people who are like, oh, I won't do non-organic produce, or I won't do the non-nutritive sweeteners.
Yes, the sweeteners.
And, just different things like that it could be. And there's so much fear-mongering around food. I talked about before, like the guys in the grocery stores that yell about all the products.
There's the fear-mongering from others. And I also think there's the internal fear-mongering of, oh my gosh, I've come this far. I don't ever want to go back. Like, I'm so petrified of doing the wrong thing. I almost wonder if that is some of our patients. I mean, some of them, they see you constantly, like every week, which is great. Right. That's great if that's how you feel like you get something out of it. But I think sometimes, do you ever feel like, okay, we've reviewed this, like you've looked,
know this information. Yeah. And people just don't trust themselves. And I think some of that could be maybe you had some issues with binge eating disorder before and you didn't have any trust or relationship with food. And so then you take that too far where you don't trust yourself anymore with food. And maybe you're worried that you're going to eat one of those trigger foods and it's going to put you right back into the other end of disordered eating. Again, I think when we look at disordered eating, a lot of it's two sides of the same coin. Yes, we have binge eating and then we have orthorexia, and could those really feed into each other? Wow. One way or the other?
Yeah, I think so. And when we talk about this sort of this vicious cycle, like you said, feeding into another. So we're talking about the transfer of addictions when we're experiencing addiction replacement almost. You're just exchanging one for another. What you're doing is you're kind of trying to replicate the same positive feedback from your brain. And it's really hard to not crave that. And it can be obviously so almost physically, mentally, emotionally exhausting, uncomfortable to make like enough sweeping changes to your usual routine and habits, making it really easy to either fall back to your original addiction or to one that might even be sometimes more dangerous.
Yeah.
So you have to be so careful. So when we're talking about the different types, so we got through food addiction. Then another very common one is alcohol.
Yeah.
So particularly with our patients, the thing is people will want to know like, well, how will I be able to metabolize alcohol? What kind of effect will alcohol have on me after I have surgery? So your stomach now, the gastric bypass is now the little tiny size of a thumb-sized pouch. Your sleeve stomach is about the size of a garden hose, much smaller in there. And it is going to undoubtedly be super fast on, super fast off. So you're especially the fast on buzz. And so when you look about driving, if you've had alcohol, sometimes you can have a few sips and actually be over the legal limit.
Right.
Which is scary.
It is. And I think, then if somebody goes back to maybe drinking at the level that they were prior to surgery, which maybe was, not an excessive amount, but then you turn it into this and then I do think that it's that dopamine. It's something you can control in your life too when you can't turn to food, And I think a lot of people end up with, when they look at alcohol dependence, it's because they're unable to have a different coping mechanism that maybe they had previously.
So I think that it's this conversation is so important to be aware that, you think like, oh, it means I'm weak. No, this is like the chemistry of your brain. There's so many factors at play that you sometimes you need consistent, intensive medical attention and help to help. Like I've said, every single one of us needs a therapist, but to kind of know yourself, to be able to improve yourself. And that takes a lot. So knowing your habits, because that's typically what a lot of these addictions are. So there are some risk factors that show an individual might be more, again, susceptible or affected by having an addiction, like a food addiction, and then transferring it after bariatric surgery to something else. So I'm going to read some things from the Obesity Action Coalition. That is a really reputable site. They have a lot of evidence and a lot of the research that is done on this in our integrative health side and the psychology of this, the mental and behavioral health aspect of bariatric surgery. But so the one that we already talked about is having a history of eating disorders, known food addiction, or compulsive eating. How would you describe compulsive eating?
That's a great question. I don't know if I know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. And then I think it's all in that same thing that you just...
my gut tells me that it's just like you can't not eat food.
Yeah, you just are and I think all of us have had. So this is the tricky thing about eating. Again, is that sometimes if you're obsessively thinking about food, it is because you are legitimately hungry, and your body's survival mechanisms and the way that you do things are kicking in, and in that if you haven't eaten because you're I'm going to be good today. We've talked about this a lot. A lot of our patients will eat too little instead of too much. And then when you restrict it to that degree, then your body is going to make you hyperly feel like compulsed to I have to eat something, and I want that quick fuel, which is glucose, which is sugar, which is and then I go down this whole other rabbit hole. Now, if you have a family history of substance abuse, so of any sort, you have an increased risk of a transfer addiction with bariatric surgery, which
a lot of people have. I know it's so common.
Yeah, and I think that is also part of the cycle that is. Sometimes why you turn to food for comfort in the first place is because you are in this abusive setting, and your dad, your mom, they're there, they're not there, they're abusive, they're they're different when they're doing these drugs or food themselves, or maybe again it was a good thing that was sort of again, when you were little, that's what you did to celebrate. You went to Disney and you had your treats, and so it's sort of the genetics and the family history of it are really significant. Now, if you drink alcohol on a regular basis, that is defined as, I would say, most nights out of the week, 5 nights out of the week or so. So regular consumption of alcohol before surgery is going to make you much more to crave it, because typically if you're drinking regular, you're wanting the buzz, you're wanting the good feeling, the feeling of feeling a little tipsy, warm, vasodilated. But after surgery, this is a warning for some of you. Again, you're going to feel that so intensely, so quickly, with such a small amount of alcohol, that you'll find yourself chasing that. And I think alcohol's one of the most common, if not the most common reasons or most common transfers of addiction that we see.
Yeah, and I could also imagine it could happen where you're out maybe with your friends or something, and maybe they're eating a really big meal and you've eaten what you can, and then there's alcohol available. So then you're or you're just trying to keep up with other people that haven't had surgery, which happens to everybody, even with or without surgery. You have that pressure to keep up, I know, which obviously could then lead to you want that, you feel that, you need that.
Exactly. And even social things, your tolerance, oh man, so-and-so could drink. They're the life of the party. Oh, look who's here, you know? And then you're all right, well, I'm the fun one. I know that my tolerance is I can drink, a 6-pack and actually, handle it. And now all of a sudden you cannot. And so first of all, there's different types of alcohol if we're going to like dive into how they affect you. So first, if you're a big beer drinker, the carbonation, you're not going to be able to handle it. It's going to cause a lot of discomfort. We've talked about this where the carbonation you just can't burp, or you can't like pop that Tupperware container and kind of alleviate that like, that pressure in that left upper quadrant of your abdomen. And so you're not going to be able to consume a massive quantity of volume.
Right, in general. And then, when it's carbonated and it's so like that, like bread. Like somebody has described drinking beer as like drinking a cup of bread, essentially. Because it's, barley and wheat. Some of them are wheat even.
Yeah, that's so true. I think maybe.
Hops? I don't know.
I'm not familiar.
I've been to breweries and run brewery tours, but apparently I retained no information. And I'm really
not paying attention.
I really don't drink beer.
I do not either. I do not drink beer. No. I don't, but.
Wine will get me.
Wine is another one. Now, wine, I would tell our bariatric patients, that's the trickiest one in terms of it's going to go down pretty smooth. It's still going to still have the same effects as we just learned, but it also has a lot of calories in it. It's just like, obviously it's just a lot of carbs and sugars in it. And it's, I think, one of the fastest ways that it kind of slows your weight loss or even causes you to gain some weight, of course. And I think that's, like people's diets when they come in, they talk to you, you know this better than me even. It's like, my diet's great. And I'm like, so what are we drinking here? And it's like, not that much, but the wine, before you know it, it gets you.
It does. Absolutely.
So I would suggest if you're somebody that's drinking wine and you feel like, no, I really just have a glass of wine or something. I truly feel like I'm in control. I'm not worried about this whole like cascade. I'm not into risky amounts or dependence or addiction or crisis. I'm nowhere near that. Like, okay, like I got you. But from a weight loss standpoint, I would challenge you to try to go 1 month without drinking any alcohol or wine. And next thing you know, boom, you're going to lose weight. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
It'll push you.
It does happen for sure.
I know. And then you got your hard liquor. And that is something, if you do a shot with bariatric surgery, I'm warning you, my friends, be so careful. Just be so careful. Do not drive. Do not.
No. And be somewhere safe,
That's a great point. So and especially like if you're like, I just want a glass, do it at home. Yeah. Don't do it out. Especially if you have to drive, do it around people you trust.
Or it's the first time. Because you don't, I always tell people when they ask me this, like, when can I drink? And usually I recommend waiting a year from surgery. And I say, but, if you choose to do it sooner or when you do choose to start, have that first one at home because you just don't know how you are going to respond to it.
No.
And I've, been with people who have had bariatric surgery who have been drinking and they'll leave a half a cocktail up at the bar because they're just like, that's all I can do. That's it. And they know their limits because it's somebody that had, they knew what they could handle. And they were like, yep, half a drink.
And I think that some of you listening right now are like, I have no control. Yeah. I don't have control. And I want you to know that you're not alone. I think that sometimes it hits your lips and you get that feeling and you just want to keep chasing it. And you're in that you're chasing that brain vibe and those feel good feelings and all of that sort of thing. And again, if you're used to it, and I want you to know that, there's been some patients who have so bravely put it out there that I'm struggling. Yeah. And I think that's what we want to like, we don't want to put like, sugarcoat this in any way that this is a real deal. And unfortunately, yes, transfer of addictions of any kind. We're going to keep going through the list so to see if you maybe some of these other ones you can relate to. And if that they do put you at an increased risk, you shouldn't feel ashamed. It's something that, again,
it's biological.
It is. Yes.
A lot of it.
It is. And I think that we're going to put it out there that there are resources and there are some amazing bariatric specific therapists out there who can help you with that. And I think that those are the best. I randomly in the airport not too long ago ran into Ashlyn Douglas. And she is somebody here in the greater Central Florida region who does a lot of our psych evaluations for our practice, many other surgeons' practices. So she's a very busy girl when I was talking to her. And she also, she told me that she does ongoing therapy, and she had gastric bypass over 10 years ago herself. So she understands all of these things. So I'm not saying you have to go to Ashlyn. I'm sure she would appreciate that, but there's many, many, many therapists all over that you should do that. Or if you're somebody that just needs to write down the way you're feeling, like, am I in control? Am I not in control? Like, just maybe journaling, writing it down, like reflecting on it, and then referring back to that and be like, okay, like just to understand your emotions.
Yeah. And I do think sometimes even with that, like tracking how much you're actually doing.
Yes.
Because it can really easily get away from you. You think, oh, I don't do it that much. And then if you actually start to quantify it, it's like, okay, this is a little more than I realized, and maybe I need to reevaluate this relationship.
Exactly. Or even having a great friend or like a buddy system, like a support, like, all right, let's just be real with each other. But then sometimes that can work the other way. Like, I'm doing it. You want to do it? You want to do another one? You want to do another round? Let's do it. And then it's like, argh. So there's a lot of that. Now, not just alcohol, but there's also if you've had a history of chronic pain or overuse of narcotics for pain management. That's so tough.
It is. So with the surgery, because I know we know with alcohol that metabolism is different. Is it different with the like opioids or anything like that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, so when we look at all types of medications, and the way that they're absorbed and the way that they're metabolized and the effect in the body, like for example, do you need to change long-acting, extended release, delayed release? I believe the answer is no. I don't make patients do that. I don't make patients increase or decrease doses. For example, the thought is like, will this be as effective or will it be more effective? I don't think so. I do think that sometimes you just have to be a little bit extra cautious with like birth control, things like that. But the narcotics, I don't think so. Now, when it comes to what do I do as a healthcare provider, as a physician, as a surgeon, after surgery, there's pain. And, gosh, I watched this. I think it was on Hulu. It was Dope Sick. And it was starring Michael Keaton, and he talked a lot about, and it was, it was based on the family that did, I'm blanking on their name.
Oh, the Sackler family.
Sackler, good job. Yeah, the Sackler family. And how they just kept getting like these blurbs, and they kept targeting these physicians to keep prescribing more and more and more of these mega doses. And then
it's safe. It's so safe.
It's just so great. And then they are like, okay. And then they peeled off, and then they had like OxyContin, which is the long-acting version, and just oh boy, the gateway into heroin and all of that sort of thing. And just watching that just gives you so much compassion and empathy that when someone starts to that first initiation and then experimentation of this substance, it's not that anybody wants to be down that road.
Right.
You just look at people and you're like, oh, you can't control it. It's just so difficult. So if you can, don't start it. Now, for myself, we try to do surgery, and we use a lot of a local anesthetic. We try to numb the areas, numb the muscle underneath to give you some local pain control. There'll be the gas pains. We have you do Gas X. We have simethicone, which is Gas X, or using Tylenol. And then when you're there, you will have a little bit of narcotics, which typically you're in pain. And if you take narcotics for pain, it's fine in their intended use. But, I've known of patients who have struggled with it and have even admitted to me, like, I have a problem. Like, I'm crushing them and I'm just trying to get them into my system faster. I'm snorting them and just things like that. And they've experimented with heroin. And that stuff is obviously when you're in like the crisis and you need to go into some intense inpatient rehab. And I think the first step in doing anything overwhelming, like changing your life, whether that be through weight loss surgery or trying to kick one of these addictions, is just seeking out and saying, I need help. And there's a lot of resources, but it's just hard to come to that position.
Yeah. But I think it's the best thing you can do for yourself. It is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Absolutely. And I hope that if we just help one person to be like, here it is, do it, we'll provide you with resources, find that therapist, that person, that lifeline that will get you through this. And know this too. No matter what, this is going to be a day-by-day thing. That's why there's nothing about bariatric surgery that's easy. As we know, it takes daily commitment into this. And it's the same thing with food addiction and alcohol addiction, narcotic addiction. Here, it's also having a history of depression or other mood or anxiety disorders too. And I think a lot of all of us as humans struggle with that. And we're going to be doing a 3-part series on some of these things coming up. But, I was totally random thought here. I was just at Adele, and she was a phenomenal concert. She was just superb, outstanding. And she kept saying like, oh my gosh, I have so much stage fright. I'm so nervous. And that's kind of her thing, her openness. And the way she talks and all of that, I'm like, she's an anxious individual.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like that's on one hand, like it's like sometimes crippling, and it's just like you're trying to like soothe the anxiety. And like I said, we'll have a whole show on that. But it's also on the other hand, like your superpower, and that like you get things done. I mean, when I'm looking around the room, the whole time I was like, this human created this music and did these things.
Right.
And then feelings are meant for feeling. We've talked about that, and just being uncomfortable in your own skin sometimes. And how do you just keep telling yourself and deep breathe and do other mechanisms other than turning to food or alcohol or narcotics or drugs or something else that's potentially harmful to your body? How do you get through that in another way?
Right. Channel it in a positive manner.
Totally. Here's another big one. And this is something that I think is, a lot of these obviously are very specific to the bariatric community, and that is lack of adequate support or just feeling lonely and isolated. And that's where I feel like support groups quite literally are some people's lifelines.
Yeah, because it's somebody that's going through the same thing as you. Of course, everybody has a little variance, but they have gone through the all of the getting ready, getting to this point. They may have experienced some of the same addictions previously or had some of the same disordered eating patterns, and then you go through this big life-changing surgery. And I do agree. I think that some people and so it's like maybe you try to talk to your friends or you try to talk to your spouse and they don't get it.
No.
But these people do.
Yeah, they don't get it. I mean, it can be a lonely road. A lot of these things can be a lonely road. I think we all feel lonely at times when you're trying to change. That's hard. That's really hard. But this other one here, I think the bottom underlying thing here, and that is an avoidance of emotions and experiences that will lead you to turn to, again, the isolation, feeling recluse. A lot of our patients, like telemedicine has changed the game for us because we're able to now connect with people who might not even feel like, I can't even go outside anymore.
Right.
We talked about travel on one of our recent episodes, and it's something that is it limits you, but then it also like perpetuates the cycle of.
Right. You're at home by yourself or with maybe one person, and you're never leaving, and it just like it's a spiral. I mean, it's the best way to put it.
I think that if you can help it, which is obviously not easy, but if you can help never drinking by yourself, or like, oh, I'm just gonna like take a pill here and just kind of veg out, or I'm just gonna like order this pizza for myself. I'll have it's hard, especially if you're like, well, I don't have any family. I am, I don't have a spouse, a partner, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a friend, and that's tough. That's really, really hard. And I can get all of that kind of thing. But I think that that's something that you need to, again, feel all the feelings.
Yes. And that is where it's like starting to look kind of out, thinking outside of the box for what could that support person be. Maybe maybe you are alone at home, but you have somebody that you can FaceTime and they can virtually be there with you while you're doing something. Or so you're not like, you can connect in different ways, kind of just like with the telemedicine. Like you have all these other opportunities, join a support group, whether you've had bariatric surgery or not, or you're not even thinking about it. Like they are super supportive of anything, like such supportive people.
Totally.
And if you are in that space and you feel unsupported, like they can share past experiences with you. You know, I see people in these that are 20 years out from bariatric surgery. So they've seen it all and they have a lot to share.
Absolutely. And the last one on this list is a history of engaging in self-sabotaging tendencies. I think this one is so important too. Like what you put out into the universe, what you say, what you think even, like, I suck. Oh, I look terrible. I don't deserve this. I'm dumb. You know, like if the way you even think about money or about promotions or about, again, your self-image or your worthiness of having a relationship can make you just be like, oh, well, my body, my temple is not worth taking care of anyway because I'm such a loser. So I might as well just go nuts.
Yeah. No, I definitely can see that really being a big trigger.
I think so too. And again, the bottom line is addiction does not discriminate. It doesn't at all. Obesity does not discriminate at all. This can truly happen to anyone. And there are some signs and symptoms of addictive behavior. So the first thing is if you need more and more and more of that behavior or of that substance. We talked a lot about substance and specific things you're putting into your body, but we didn't really talk about sex addiction.
I think in our sex episode, we kind of touched on that a little bit, that is one that can happen. What about shopping? Do you think that's an addiction?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because when that cha-ching, cha-ching, whenever that, you know, and then you get that high for a second and then you're just like, you're chasing it. And sometimes people are like, oh gosh. I mean, I'm sure we all know people that are like, oh my gosh, they just like live and die for shopping.
Yeah. Well, and I think when your body is changing that much too, you have the opportunity to go and shop and then you're like, oh, I have maybe more options than I did before. Maybe you're able to kind of walk into any store and buy something. And it's like, I've been for 20, 30, 40 years, haven't been able to shop. So it's kind of making up. And then again, it has that feedback loop of like, well, then I feel good because I have this new thing. So now I want to feel good again, so I'm going to buy more.
Oh, absolutely.
And influencers don't help.
I know. With some of these like brands that so now they're like influencer brands that are becoming kind of synonymous with the bariatric community, I've noticed, and we all know who they are. And it's great because they do great, especially they're super flattering and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But if you're like, oh my gosh, I just spent $500, $600 I don't have. I just, you know, like constantly splurging, treat yourself. I mean, it's tough. It's tough for all those considerations. If you feel like you're using the substance or engaging in that behavior for longer than intended or in higher amounts than desired, other behaviors are things like a gambling addiction.
Oh, yeah.
That can be a big one. Again, it's just that feedback loop of like, oh, that feels so good, you know, that whole thing. If you feel like, especially when you're sober or after you made a big purchase or after you ate a huge amount, if you feel like, oh, I have a strong desire that I should not be engaging in this. And despite knowing this is not good for me, I'm progressing here. This is getting riskier and it's now becoming harmful to me. I just cannot be successful in my attempts. That means, you know, things are becoming somewhat of an issue.
Right. It's outside of maybe your forefront control. It's somewhere back in your brain chemistry that it's gotten to that point that it's kind of crossed over.
Yeah. And if it impacts your social, professional, personal, financial, or legal problems related to it. So if you're waking up and like, give me my phone. What did I do? I blacked out last night. Okay. And then if it's like, all right, okay. But if it's like, oh my gosh, this is repeatedly happening, you know, one of my favorite patients in Baltimore, she just put a very long post about, you know, just she realized that every time she drank, she didn't remember conversations. She completely blacked out. She would wake up in places that she didn't remember where she fell asleep. She felt out of control. She felt dangerous. She felt like she needed to put it out there publicly and share that. That was her way of making herself feel like, okay, I need to get accountable to this. I need to like get in control of this. And like, I know we talk about bravery and all that, but I think that's not only are you open about your journey on weight loss, but also you're open about this struggle, which is not, you know, it's not specific to you. It is, again, anyone can feel that.
Yeah, and it's not talked about as much as some of, you know, the other other things, I would say. And I don't and that's amazing. I hope she's doing well, and I hope she's been able to, you know, be successful in getting herself back on track. But I think, you know, the other thing is too is some of these things probably are more normalized. You know, you think about the shopping and you see, well, all these people are buying all these things and I should be able to do that, or I'm going to do that too. And it's very normal. And so it's like if you're starting to see too, you know, I think social media can play a big impact in some of these things. And if you're starting to notice that people that you follow, that you are invested in, they're starting to have risky behaviors and you're like, it's starting to influence you in that way, like unfollow or hide them.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if you're noticing that, say you have a friend that you know you guys will go drink for drink, toe for toe, like maybe let's hang out with them in a situation where there isn't alcohol. Or again, maybe they need to be cut out for a while or potentially forever, depending on how they impact your life. But I think really prioritizing yourself, recognizing the signs, the potential issues, you know, am I going down this path? And you know, what can I do to stop as early as possible? And is this something I need to be really evaluating? And do I need to reach out to a professional?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. You're like removing the cues that get you going. And sometimes it's like the shopping addiction and those sorts of things. I mean, social media is also an addiction in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
And that's such a good example. Like when you see there's somebody that you look at their stuff and you're like, gosh, they look so good. They're so perfect. And that makes you feel, like you said, bad about yourself or it triggers you negatively in any way. Social media is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be like, you know, cool, look at Hannah on her trip to Italy. Like, this is great. But it shouldn't make you feel like Hannah on her trip to Italy makes me really upset. Like, I mean, and it sometimes, I mean, that's the whole point is like, my life is so perfect. It's so airbrushed. It's so great. But behind closed doors, I'm like crying, you know, like, I mean, my life is not easy. And
y'all don't see all the pictures of just me and my cats hanging out.
I do. There's a lot of those. There's a lot of those guys. Let me just tell you, I'll spare you on that one. But yeah, I mean, I do think, I just think that there is something to be said about everybody experiences lows and everybody, you know, and the way we deal with these things is really different. And is how do you try to deal with those things in a healthy manner is what we really want to hope that we give you. So if you feel guilt or shame about your behavior, if you feel defensive, if you deny it when other people ask you, if you feel like you're doing it in secrecy, you're sneaking things, you know, so that your people that maybe you live with or even when your friends are out, this is my first drink, when you know that you chugged a bottle before you came out, like, okay, like what am I doing? Who am I hiding this from? Am I being honest even with my own self and all this? Am I believing my own BS on this one too? Yeah. And then the behavior or the substance becomes one of the main things that you look forward to. That's the only thing that you're like, get me through this work day. I mean, listen, we all kind of feel that way about certain things in our life. Like, oh my God, it's almost the weekend and I know what that means. I mean, the work day's tough. I just feel so stressed right now. Like I just want to like pop this edge off. But, you know, sometimes you have to fight through that. And that is something I will say that for myself personally, I have really like, I've been off for a few months and I just feel like, no, I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm not going to drink or do anything. I got to just remain just this chapter of my life. Like, I just want to make sure that I like feel it and I know it and I, you know,
like clarity of it.
Yeah. I don't want to be cloudy.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Like sometimes you think you want to kind of get like blurry, but sometimes I just, no, I want to be alert. I want to remember this. And I just, you know, all that stuff. I mean, I could go deep into it.
Sit in it.
Totally.
So I would say one thing to kind of finish this up is, you know, what are some behaviors that are maybe more of a positive thing that you could turn to when you're feeling this way? Now, again, kind of like with orthorexia, you can go too far with a good thing. Sure. And the first thing that comes to my mind is exercise.
Yes.
Because yes, exercise is a stress reliever. It is good for our bodies. It's good for our hearts. Like, proven science that exercise is good for us. But there are absolutely people out there who are addicted to exercise. I believe it.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, and again, it goes into that, like, if you can't take a day off from exercise without feeling like it's the end of the world, if you can't, if your exercise gets shortened, if you get injured and you're out for a while and it just takes you down, I think that's a place to really evaluate. But in general, and for a lot of people, exercise would be a great alternative to some of these things. You get through the workday and it's like, oh, but then you're like, you know what? But now I get to go swim. I get to go and do this activity that I enjoy, and it's going to give me endorphins. And as in Legally Blonde, she says, endorphins make you happy, and happy people just don't kill their husbands.
Was that her defense? Yeah, that was exactly.
Yeah. So I think that, that is a good one. Looking at other kind of hobbies too. If it's that, you binge eat and it's while you're watching TV or something, maybe finding other things to do with your hands, being active in like maybe a hobby, going and volunteering, finding other things that are going to give you that dopamine, and that's what you're chasing, but make it a more positive thing. Have 2 kittens that you play with.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
She does not agree on that one.
What advice, Hannah. But I mean, or even something else that I see repeatedly is just to meditate, just to sink deep within yourself and just be still. Just stop, be still. This too shall pass. Anxiety is this fear that the worst case scenario will be the most likely scenario. It is not. So don't chase it. Don't run after the bottle. Just be still and go into yourself, and you will know the answers that you need to. I mean,
and sometimes that pause, it can stop you from the behavior.
Oh, so
if you cannot do it for 2 minutes, it's like, okay, I cannot go and open that bottle of wine.
Exactly.
No, I'm not saying it's that easy. I'm not by any means trying to minimize addiction. Yeah, just don't do it. Just stop. Come on, guys. And then, of course, the other thing would be always, if you have any concern, reach out to a mental health professional.
Totally.
And, there's resources online. There's different people out there. We'll try to get some people together to share with you when this comes out, and so that you can have a place to go, that if you feel like, even if it's the beginning, even if you're like, I'm just starting to think this may maybe potentially be a problem, read into it. Always, I like to say, always explore your doubt about something. And if you're starting to doubt yourself on something, reach out, or even to your surgical team, and they might have some advice or be able to talk you through it.
Yeah, and if you are still pre-op and you're like, oh gosh, I'm really worried about this, and you just heard some of the risk factors, you heard some of the signs and the symptoms of it, I think that you should really, if you kind of know that, like, again, you drank alcohol beforehand and then you know that you're stopping and you're like, I'm feeling better, I'm losing weight, all is good. Really, I always think, like, especially in our program, we do recommend that people be away from alcohol for the whole first year. And that is not an arbitrary feat. So if you actually do it for the first year, so it's sort of like Forrest Gump, why stop running? Just keep on going. Like, why pick it up? Like, I don't know. I think if you can avoid it and it's not necessary, don't go there.
Don't start it again. Yeah.
I know, in a lot of things, like, I mean, we talk about it all the time, but I was addicted to cherry Coke. I just tell myself, no, you're not going to do it again. If you quit smoking, try it. Like, just don't. If you got past those first few days of like cravings and going, almost physically nuts about it, then it's just if you push through, like, honestly, like the low carb diet too, like, why reincorporate it? It's like, it's tough. But so if you can't help it, try not to do it. But and then the one final thing is, just as much as you love getting support, if you see somebody else is struggling out there, go in those support groups and put your comments, your experiences, because you don't know that what you write might actually help them. And then in the process, you saved yourself too.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Just be like, I'm strong. I'm going to type on Facebook all night, and there you go.
There you go. Yeah. And embrace your community.
Totally.
Engage with them. All right. Well, as always, if you have any other follow-up questions or concerns, you are welcome to reach out to us on Instagram at DoctorXDietitian, or check us out at our website, DoctorXDietitian.com. Make sure you sign up for our mailing list so you get all of our episode guides and all of our goodies. And if you are struggling, please reach out to a mental health professional.
Yeah, message us if you need it too. We are here for you and we respond to our DMs on Instagram. All right, bye guys. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.